Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Okay, what's this?
That is, it looks like somebody in some kind of spacesuit or something, but it must not be. What is it?
A robot suit, Bob.
It's a robot suit. Okay, is it a person in a robot suit or a robot in a robot suit?
It's a person in a robot suit. We're going to have a robot theme for today,
Good.
and this is from New Hampshire in 2016. You remember that?
Not the robot part. I remember New Hampshire. It's a state. Am I right?
You don't remember the Rubio robot?
What was that, a Chris Christie creation? It was playing on the same theme Christie played on, presumably.
Right. The backstory is I have a little personal interest in this because my one appearance in the mainstream media was I was hanging around the MSN, whatever it is, the site where they were filming it, and Steve Kornacki took pity on me and had me on the panel. And I predicted confidently that those people who were expecting Chris Christie to take out Marco Rubio and do Trump's dirty work for him were crazy. That never happens. It never happens, Bob.
And have you been invited back to MSM since then, Mickey?
I have not. And it
with
happened.
good reason. With good reason.
And so Christie took out Rubio, and these Rubio robot, because Rubio sort of started behaving robotically in response to the attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And Christie said, "There you go again." And the Rubio robots showed up as a sort of either spontaneous or planned, must have been spontaneous response. And they were actually pretty nice guys. But that was a photo of him getting beaten up by Rubio supporters.
They actually beat up the guy in the robot suit?
They punched him, and he said, "Why are you beating me up?" And then he ran away. It was hilarious.
If anybody doesn't remember that, it was like a too good to be true moment where Chris Christie says to Rubio, all you ever do is recite talking points, and Rubio just starts reciting the very talking points he had just recited right before Christie said that. And this is commonly taken to be the end of the Rubio candidacy, although it didn't do Christie's candidacy any good.
Right. And so what Christie is trying to do the same thing to Trump, and he's making the argument, and he's mocking people who don't attack Trump directly. And, he is taking on Trump, and it reflects the philosophy that's put forward by some consultants, including, I think, a woman named Sarah Longwell, who's quoted in the New York Times, saying the only way to destroy Trump is to go through him. And that's just insane.
What does that mean? Wait, what does go through him mean?
Attack him directly, take him out.
Oh, yeah.
And
why is that insane? I thought that was a conventional wisdom that
it is. It's wrong. It's crazy. It's people are trying to take Trump out directly. He was indicted, Bob. He's a crook.
you don't focus on those things if you're a Republican. You don't focus on those things if you're a Republican. You say you didn't get your wall built. There are things you can attack him on if you're a Republican.
Okay, but I don't think that's what Christie's talking about. Anyway, my friend John Ellis is the opposite point of view, where he thinks in order to beat Trump, you have to honor him first, and then you can distinguish yourself.
You come not to bury him, but to praise him.
Well, because the reality of the campaign that people are worried about is that there's this vast mass of Trump voters who only come out for Trump. They're in rural areas, but they're pretty big. They're the biggest bunch of unvoting voters that are out there. And you don't get them by attacking Trump. Your only hope with them is not to go through Trump, but to, stand on the shoulders of Trump or do something. And that's why.
How do you stand on the shoulders of Trump?
Maybe that's not right, but I'm trying to think of what a good analogy would be. So that's why this ad, this allegedly and probably really homophobic ad that somebody made to promote DeSantis, that was retweeted by the independent DeSantis super PAC, Never Back Down, was bad because it went right at Trump, saying you are promoting, trans ideology and you're paving the way for LGBTQ, and attacking Trump directly like that is probably not the way to get this vast mass of rural Trump voters. And so it was, Ellis thinks it was just insane. Quite apart from the homophobia aspect of it, it was insane to go after Trump directly.
I haven't seen the video, but the New York Times in the you laugh. Is that how out of it I am? You mean the video's everywhere?
Yeah, it's a short video and it features a lot of appealing homoerotic imagery, like bodybuilders, naked, shirtless men.
Oh, well, then sign me up. That sounds great. But
you don't understand.
But I noticed in the New York Times they have a front page story on the actual physical.
And that's in the pro DeSantis part. Yeah, good.
So the Times cites this as one of DeSantis. The headline is DeSantis, misstep by misstep, struggles to cut Trump's lead. And they cite it, but I got the impression that they were. I thought this was kind of typical New York Times, echo chamber. Them thinking that a homophobic ad would hurt DeSantis in a Republican primary. Seems to me it could well help him in a Republican primary, but you're saying there's a different problem with it, right?
Yeah, I'm saying there's a different problem, and also I just think I don't know. I think DeSantis. It's pretty clear what's happened to this. I mean, it's pretty clear what's happened to DeSantis, which is he hasn't found his footing, but that's not why he's behind. He's getting the same 20% he always got. The problem is Trump was indicted and Trump soared in the polls, and that's the way the race is. It hasn't changed since then.
So basically, nothing can work against Trump. It isn't that going through him is the wrong strategy. There's no right strategy. Because you never fleshed out that standing on his shoulders metaphor, Mickey. I don't know what that means.
The only hope is to praise his policies and at some point point out that he didn't build the wall, and maybe it's time for the relief pitcher to come in.
You say he was the right guy for that time because he got this stuff on the agenda, but obviously he doesn't finish his swing, as they say in golf. He doesn't follow through. He's not a guy to get things done. He set the agenda, he set the table, and I'm here to eat. That's what you say.
DeSantis can do both the golf metaphors and the baseball metaphors, so he can do either one.
You're right. He's a dual threat. There you go. I already feel his momentum building now that we've helped him out.
Part of the problem with DeSantis is there were a couple of little missteps, like that Ukraine statement, which I didn't realize was written, which makes it sort of worse.
Wait, the one about a border dispute, a territorial dispute? Yeah.
There's a territorial dispute. So there are a couple of small missteps, but basically the press is out to get it. Okay. And it would be good if he showed some nuance and got the press on his side. And I think the only way to do that is give either a big 60 Minutes interview or interviews with a lot of reporters where he, comes across as a reasonable person that doesn't back off his positions, but defends his positions, which are completely defensible. I mean, he can say, I'm not anti-gay. I'm against teaching sexuality to third graders. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He can say that. Okay. Perfectly reasonable thing. And he can do what Newsom did with his Hannity interview, which is everybody takes a second look at the guy and says, he's not insane. Why are we trashing him? And I think that would be a good move for him. He's certainly up to it. And this idea that you're going to run to the right of Trump by bashing Trump seems a dead end.
No, I agree. You have to pause to praise him and say he's just not the guy for the job. It's like what a Democratic challenger should say to Biden if there were one. He's the Trump stopper. He saved our country from descending into chaos and righted the ship, but he's older than shit, and I'm not.
You could even say that Trump saved America. How about that? I would even defend that.
You could say that about Biden. They should both challengers in both parties should be saying, "This guy saved America. Thank you.
Right.
It's time to head off stage." They should,
and you could make both cases. It's just I don't think DeSantis should make the Biden case, and I don't think.
No, you're correct. That would be bad messaging. For DeSantis to say, I think Joe Biden saved America, I don't think that's the way to eat into Trump's lead. No, I agree.
Part of the problem is they all have these super PACs, and DeSantis' super PAC is especially powerful and well-funded. And so and DeSantis, by law, cannot control the super PAC. And so somebody retweets this tweet, and DeSantis somehow is responsible for it.
Which tweet? The super PAC tweet?
The gay, the homophobic anti-gay ad.
So his super PAC did it for him?
Homoerotic homophobic ad. What?
His super PAC prepared the ad for him? Is that what happened?
No, it's some random DeSantis supporter prepared the ad, and then the DeSantis super PAC said, "Hey, this is sort of cool. Let's
retweeted it." I see.
And, you know, the idea, they're all staffed by these young people who like these radical memes, and they like being entertained by the memes. And
I know the type. Yeah.
They sort of, they're appealing to their own ilk, and they don't think about what the larger ramifications.
So they chose to post it, or they just casually retweeted it? They actually chose to tweet it.
Reposted, I think. I don't know.
I'm not sure about that. That's mixed terminology. Speaking of which, are you on Threads yet? Are you on Threads, Mickey?
I'm on Threads. I have a conclusion about Threads.
Should we save it for after? Is there more politics to talk about?
Yeah, there's plenty more politics to talk about.
Oh, we'll save Threads.
Okay.
So before we get to Threads, what else is there to say about domestic politics? There's also
there's all this talk. There's all this talk about others coming into the race. Kemp is the flavor of the week. Kemp, the governor of Georgia, he's defeated Trump before in his local Georgia races, where Trump was against him for getting reelected. He got reelected. Trump was for Perdue as senator. He was for the candidate who eventually won, in the primary.
Now, did Kemp not participate? He refused to participate in the election denial, right?
Right.
Okay.
And he's that
could hurt him in the primary, but I like it. He's got
anyway. But I don't understand the theory of this late entry. The idea is that somehow the race is going to go along, and Kemp is suddenly going to enter, and he's going to get 43% of the vote instantaneously. I mean, everybody can say, "Oh, you are our savior." I just don't see that happening. You get the 43% by entering the race and building it up over time, and not jumping in at the last minute. They're sort of the analogy would be 1968. Bobby Kennedy jumping into the Democratic primary. But that's because there was a huge well of antipathy towards Lyndon Johnson among Democratic primary voters. There is no huge well of antipathy toward Donald Trump among Republican primaries.
I don't think any sane person is expecting that kind of surge from any rivals. It's going to be 4 yards in a cloud of dust, folks. You better get started now. On the Democratic side, I mean, please. I mean, it turns out, when he said that Putin's losing the war in Iraq, I think it turns out that's the second time in 24 hours or 36 hours that he had said exactly that. He also,
I think you're going to say, it turns out it was brilliant. Putin is losing the war in Iraq.
Not that we know of. But and then also, this isn't so bad, I guess. It's more of an indictment, actually, of Josh Rogan of the Washington Post. But Josh Rogan wrote this piece where he spoke to some Syrians who went to a fundraiser, and they say, or one of them says, that they said to Joe Biden, Assad must go, and Biden said, I agree. I'm sorry. That's not enough to hang a piece in the Washington Post on. That's just Josh Rogan's neocon regime changeism getting the better of him. That's just not solid enough. But Biden probably did say it, and he shouldn't. What's that?
Josh Rogan is making sure it's not going to happen. By putting that out there, he'll immediately be shot down, and forces will be mobilized.
I assure you that Josh Rogan's goal is not to stop regime change in Syria.
Right. I'm saying he was foolish if that is his goal to do it. He was counterproductive.
He may have just needed a story, but he's hardcore. He's a hardcore neocon who, for some reason, has been given this position at the Post.
Well, as long as
it's a weird like, I don't think he's part of the actual opinion section, but it's kind of a column. He's kind of, it's reported but it's, there's a lot of attitude. And he is, I mean, hardcore neocon.
Increasingly, journalism is becoming that.
It is. You're right. Just a lot more attitude. Obviously, that's what gets you the clicks.
And people have a vein. People have a vein. They mine, and they mine the vein, and they don't sort of produce stories that are against their cause. Anyway, that doesn't really bother me, but you should know where they're coming from. Now that you subtly shifted the topic to foreign policy, Bob.
That was subtle.
What about this guy Prigozhin? He's turned up again. He's not dead. Not a dead man walking. He turned up in St. Petersburg. There were a couple of interesting stories about how the FSB, which is some Russian agency that's supposed to.
I think it's a successor to the KGB.
Yeah, it's supposed to monitor these things. They're supposed to know what's up. They didn't warn people about Prigozhin's mutiny. Is that because they subtly supported it? A lot of the agencies didn't stop him on his march to Moscow. They didn't mobilize. If you were Putin, you'd sort of worry, why didn't they mobilize? Are half the people
wait, do we know that they were told to mobilize and didn't or something? Or, I mean, what do we know more now? I mean, we know that there was not a decision to intervene except to send some helicopters over. And once they got shot down, I think somebody decided, let's see if we can end this more gracefully. Than to have an all-out war with 5,000 well-armed guys. But do we know? Because that was the initial take, was the military stood on the sidelines. Well, I mean, we don't know that Putin gave anybody an order they didn't follow.
But the intelligence thing is, it's the dog that didn't bark.
They didn't know. It's a pretty weird failure because supposedly our intelligence knew about it. You don't.
The argument is they did know, and they decided not to do anything about it.
Now, an interesting little twist is, I taped a podcast with these Russians with attitude guys, and then I'm going to be on theirs. It hasn't. Let's see. It'll be public on Tuesday, and it'll paid Nonzero subscribers will get it, I guess, tomorrow. But I don't know how I did. I'm not sure. I kind of am. I'm not sure. I mean, they were fine. I think maybe I could have. I don't know. Long story. We can talk about it in the Parrot Room. But a couple of interesting things. One of which I'd actually heard one of them say on his podcast. But he thinks Prigozhin was waiting, anticipating that the counteroffensive would show early signs of success, that the Russian lines would collapse, and then he was going to make his move and say, I'm your savior. I'm the only guy who's gotten any success in Ukraine, and that he was forced to move early, I guess, because he thought his movements had been detected. It's hard to believe they weren't detected by anybody because this was not a spontaneous thing. I mean, it was a big logistical challenge to get all these men in there and then have them go to Moscow. And I think that's why the U.S. intelligence spotted them. It's weird if they did not know. And yet they acted as if they didn't see it coming. It's true. It's weird.
Why isn't he dead? Why is he not in Belarus, but back in Russia and giving interviews to the press?
I think it's Belarus. There was a car called the Belarus.
Okay, sorry.
But that's a different thing. The the deal they cut, Putin wanted to avoid the bloodshed and whatever else, and said, okay, we won't, he didn't want to have a big war with 5,000 guys, and also, I mean, again, these guys were war heroes. Okay, there are all kinds of downsides to having a big bloody confrontation with him, and at the time, he seemed to be saying. We'll exile you instead, and you'll get to keep these troops can follow you into Belarus. And who knows? We don't know what the deal was. And we also, in terms of why Prigozhin is reportedly back in St. Petersburg, we don't know if he's just getting to clean out his locker, or and maybe take $100 million or so in cash with him, or and then scurry back to Belarus. We don't know, but we also don't know how much leverage he has with Putin. It's like it could range from having dirt on Putin. I doubt it's the kind of blackmail thing, to him having just kinds of trouble he could create within the government that Putin knows about. And it could also have to do with the extent of his control of the far-flung Wagner apparatus. There have been reports that Putin's trying to seize control of it, but we don't know what the corporate structure of it is. It may be, and if he has solid control of this huge, global network that Putin wants to continue to exert influence over, that's a lot of leverage. I have no idea what the deal is. We never heard what the full fleshed out deal to begin with.
What does Russians with attitude say about him?
They don't think Prigozhin was just unstable. Their line is that he was rushed into doing his thing. I don't think they think it was a true coup attempt. But we didn't spend that much time on it. But
supposedly I don't know if there's video, but there are reports of Prigozhin entering the command center and talking with some subordinate generals and saying, we want to get rid of this General Gerasimov and Shoigu, however you pronounce the other guy. And they all said, you're telling me, let's see. Oh,
in the early video?
There's dissension in the ranks. There's not.
You mean the video during the mutiny?
Yeah.
Yeah. The one guy said, you can have him. And that guy was like a deputy defense minister. Well, wait, there were two guys. They were both high level. One of them was one of 5 deputies in maybe the defense ministry. The other was of comparable rank in the GRU. That's the Foreign Intelligence Agency. They're like, general officer level guys. And Prigozhin he knew him, but he said you're right. He said to one of them, I want to get rid of I want the defense minister. That's the other thing that's come out lately, is that supposedly Prigozhin had plans to actually kidnap these two guys, the defense minister and the kind of chief of staff. But anyway, he said, I want Shoigu and I want Gerasimov. And the one guy said, you can have them. So I don't know. I'm starting to get the feeling this is different from the American military, the way this whole thing works.
But it's weird if Putin is presiding over a loosey-goosey structure where you can diss your commanding officers.
No, and I've got to think it's a bad look for Putin domestically if it looks like he hasn't really sent Prigozhin to the woodshed for a whipping and is going to keep him there. But who knows what kind of leverage.
What happened to General Armageddon?
General Armageddon. Oh, well, that's the other thing. He hasn't been seen. You're talking about Surovikin, right?
Right.
He's, when the U.S. intelligence people said, when we heard these leaks right after the mutiny that he was involved, nobody knew whether that was just U.S. intelligence trying to plant doubt in Putin's mind. Again, he did come out early on video and oppose the mutiny and urge Prigozhin to stop. But I don't think he's been seen in public since. And that's weird. He is, you'd get a twofer out of planting doubt in Putin's mind. If your goal were to freak Putin out, that would be one of them. The other thing is that this guy's apparently more competent than the two guys that Prigozhin was after.
Right.
And this guy had been something of a Prigozhin ally, but again, he came out against the mutiny early. So I don't know. Look, stay tuned. It doesn't seem to have affected the battlefield in any obvious way, except, Wagner had already kind of withdrawn from Bakhmut. And so maybe that's when that damage was done. But, one place, Ukraine has not been making much progress still on the main, what we've thought of as the main front of the counteroffensive in the South. They have been, for whatever reason, devoting real resources to Bakhmut and making some progress there on the flanks, perhaps with the goal of actually retaking it.
What they call progress in some of the reports seem to be, the Russians are on offense attacking us, but we're doing a lot of damage and taking out a lot of tanks and supplies, so we're winning because we're eroding their capabilities. But they're attacking us. It's not that we're attacking them.
Yeah, no, the the offensive is not going well. I mean, and who knows? They could stage a miraculous, they could say it wouldn't be miraculous, I guess. They could stage a comeback, and there has been progress in the South. Like I told you a couple of weeks ago, they'd taken this string of villages early, but oddly, they had done that before they cleared the high ground, the flanks surrounding them, and so they were kind of in trouble. Well, they've cleared those flanks now, so that's now a broader front, but it's not much deeper. They're still 5 miles from the main defense entrenchments along that particular axis, which is where they were a couple of weeks ago. And now, how bad this is depends on how much human and material resources they're consuming in the process of not making much progress. That's an important question, and I don't know the answer. You certainly get the sense that they're not getting their people and machinery chewed up the way they were in that first week. But it's and there are a lot of variables that could work to their advantage, but ultimately, they are going to get some new weapons and stuff. But I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to know, what do you think? Go ahead.
I think you're starting to see, if you really want to try to see it and squint, a way that we could be working seriously toward a ceasefire within a few months. And in fact, I think we saw some signs of that this week. I mean, for starters, what's that? Well, first of all, I asked the Russians with attitude guys, do you think Putin would be up for a ceasefire? He just more or less settled for what he's got. And it's interesting that the first thing the guy said was, well, wait a second, you're assuming Zelensky would be? And of course, when we say, shouldn't Zelensky settle for a deal? Everybody says, well, you think Putin would? Well, yeah. I think Putin would. I mentioned an American retired general who said that last week. These guys said it in minute. They said, yes, they think Putin is up for it. Lukashenko, the head of Belarus, said he thinks that Putin is ready for it. But I think the more, I don't know that he is, but it's certainly plausible. And you would think that any insecurity he feels on the domestic front would make him only more willing to settle for some stability on the front. But there were a couple of other things this week. First of all, story today on NBC that there has been track 2 diplomacy going on since April. Track 2 means they're not really officials of the government. In this case, it was Richard Haass, just until very recently head of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Pope of the Blob. The
Pope of the Blob, as Andrew Sullivan memorably called him, and Charlie Kupchan. The two of them, about the time the Track 2 thing started, wrote a piece in Foreign Affairs, co-authored, which of course is published by the Council on Foreign Relations, kind of saying it's time to think about peace by the end of the year. So that's pretty high-level Track 2. And supposedly it was like Track 2.5 in the sense that they weren't just talking to other, civilians, other people out of government. They actually talked to Lavrov, the foreign minister. That's the report, at least. The other thing is there was a story in the Post reporting, and this that Bill Burns, head of the CIA, gone to see Zelensky, and Zelensky, let me read for it. It says, in private, publicly, Ukrainian officials are complaining that everyone's complaining about the counteroffensive lack of progress. But in private, military planners in Kyiv have relayed to Burns and others bullish confidence in their aim to retake substantial territory by the fall, move artillery and missile systems near the boundary line of Russian-controlled Crimea, push further into eastern Ukraine, and then open negotiations with Moscow for the first time since peace talks broke down in March of late last year. So apparently that is their professed plan, is to get to the brink of Crimea and then think they got, Putin where they want him, and maybe he'll surrender some territory that he's currently in possession in. Who knows? But I think the other interesting thing about this is that, assuming it was a tactical leak from the administration, it was attributed to administration officials, I think it may have also, from their point of view, I don't think they're as optimistic as Ukraine is sounding here. And from their point of view, it may have been a way of getting on the record like, okay, this is what Ukraine says they can do. And if they haven't done that in a few months, look, it's going to be time to talk peace. So in this scenario, either way, it's time to talk peace, right? I mean, if Ukraine gets to where they say they are, by their account, they'll be ready. If they don't, now it may be at that point politically harder for Putin. I don't know. I mean, that's starting to become such a black box, so full of contingency that I don't know.
It's easier for them if Ukraine doesn't get to where they want to go. It's easier for
if they
Putin
don't.
to cut
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It could be harder for him if Ukraine does succeed.
How would Putin give up something he already has unless Ukraine sees the big bargaining chip?
No, I think that's unrealistic. I think Ukraine would really, he would have to feel that Crimea that they had it in their capacity to somehow wreak havoc in Crimea. Maybe with these long range, we're going to give them apparently these missiles with 190-mile range. They've already got the British plane launched version of something that goes almost that far. But I don't personally. It doesn't seem that plausible to me that he actually vacates a lot of land. Remember, he's well short. He doesn't have control of a single of the 4 provinces that he has supposedly annexed.
Either way, by the end of the year, or by the fall, the end of the counteroffensive, they might be ready to negotiate something that basically is a ceasefire, and everybody gets to keep what they already have. Doesn't that drives the Ann Applebaums of the world insane, right?
Wait, so what does again? If
they have a ceasefire in place and have a negotiation where basically they each keep what they got. Ukraine
short of her
independent, and Putin gets his land bridge and parts of the Russian speaking areas, and they call it a day. That seems like a good outcome to me, but there is a certain element of the American foreign policy establishment that does not include Richard Haass, apparently, who it'll drive crazy, right?
Certainly her, but I think, and presumably, the Michael McFauls and Timothy Snyders of the world. But, if people take just a sober assessment of the situation, if this offensive kind of fails, it's like, okay, we could pour a ton of more weapons that create more carnage, but it just, let's be serious here. Ukrainians are, they're dying, they're losing legs. And, I heard somebody said something this week I hadn't really thought of. It's like millions of Ukrainians left Ukraine when the war began. Many of them women, took their children, their husbands stayed. And basically, the longer this goes on, the fewer of them are coming back. That's just the way it works. You get settled in a place, you have a good job, and maybe if your husband's still alive, he comes and joins you. Or maybe, you have bad news for him, and you found another man. That happens. And grimly and sadly, it's probably more likely to happen if your husband just lost 2 legs. And there's a lot of that going on. And it's easy for the Ann Applebaums and Timothy Snyder and Michael McFauls of the world to act as if what their great concern is with the Ukrainian people. But I don't really think it is. I think basically they have the reasons for hating Putin, and some of them are probably good reasons. But it just kind of makes me a little sick that we're treating the Ukrainian people as currency.
But if there is this concern that there's this big diaspora and people are worried about, will these people come back? Presumably that'll be reflected by the Ukrainians. So they will say, we're sick of this war, right? It won't be up to the McFauls.
Well, first of all,
Ukrainians say, if the Ukrainians say we want to pursue a peace deal, is Michael McFaul going to say, no, you shouldn't? He probably will, but he'll probably fall in line pretty quickly.
Well, first of all, it's a very constrained environment in Ukraine right now, expression-wise, okay? I mean, Zelensky, they shut down the Russian-speaking media a long time ago, basically. They took the 10 TV channels and reduced them to one, which puts out the state narrative. And I'm not saying this is that weird. It's different from the way we handled Vietnam, but on the other hand, that was not a war on our soil. So I'm not saying it's surprising that you would react in extreme fashion, but I'm saying, first of all, Ukraine also, unlike what we did in Vietnam, Ukraine has refused to release casualty figures on any kind of regular basis. Of course, in Vietnam, the enemy casualties were inflated, but the American casualties were accurate, more or less. So they're not. First of all, they're not getting the story. Secondly, I don't know how free they feel to speak out, but I think it's a somewhat. I mean, first of all, wartime psychology creates a very constrained environment in that regard, naturally, if there's no government clampdown. And so I wouldn't expect, to see big demonstrations. I did see a poll where they said it was like, how many Ukrainians, it was of Ukrainians, how many, do you have a close friend or relative who's died in the war? 63% said yes. And among those 63%, the average number of deaths was 3. So they're feeling it.
Zelensky doesn't strike me as a guy who's in an incredible cocoon. Do you think he is in a bubble?
No, I don't think he's in a bubble. I don't think we understand all the forces acting on him either, though. I mean, there are, we just don't know. There are clearly a lot of influential people in Ukraine who want to keep this thing going. And I will say also the public opinion polls, I would discount them for the reasons I said, but last time I checked, they seem to show public support. But, I think, we have the leverage if we want to use it to steer them toward, ceasefire. It would have the regrettable consequence of letting Russia keep some territory that they acquired by force illegally. But I don't see a realistic alternative. I mean, anything can happen. A wild card can show up and suddenly the Russian forces collapse. But we seem to be a long way from that. And Ukraine, Russia's geared up its wartime economy. I think they're doing a better job of producing like artillery shells and stuff than our side is. And as I've said before, they got a lot more people if this goes on for a long time than Ukraine does.
I think we've let Ukraine annex our entire podcast.
Sorry, I got.
Do we have time?
I got carried away.
Do we have time for
threads?
Do we have time? I'm glad because I think we actually have a dearth of subjects. How much more time do we have before we have to go to the Parrot Room?
Let me check. On
our Parrot Car.
Well, according to this, 6 minutes, but that's a little elastic.
Okay.
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff to talk about. A bunch of legal stuff, which takes a while. We can talk at least about the affirmative action thing. It is truly amazing, and Coulter has pointed this out, how the liberal press, as one, has decided not to make a big deal about the affirmative action ruling. It's like totally been deep sixed. And if you look at MSNBC, they're not talking about it anymore. They shifted totally into let's talk about legacies. Let's get rid of legacies, and that's our response. It's not this is a horrible setback for Black Americans. And an insult to all Blacks and blah, blah, blah. And it has to be overturned. They haven't said that. They're willing to let the colleges figure out how to game it and work their way through the loopholes and not go public about it. Going public about it doesn't help them there. And to focus on the responses that they have chosen, which is let's attack legacies as a vestige of white privilege. And my line on that is, why do you want to, wouldn't bother me if legacies got eliminated, but why do you want to perfect meritocracy? That's the wrong direction to go in. But my line on that, so
right.
You don't want to go into that. But it is impressive, the press discipline in not making a fuss of this. Obviously, they've seen the polls. They've shown that they know that affirmative action is unpopular. They know that a bunch of civil rights activists, yelling and screaming and complaining doesn't play well with the voters. This is a year and a half before the election. It's very disciplined.
So you mean you would have expected our liberal media to cover this critically, for there to be a lot of negative coverage of the Supreme Court ruling, and they basically rolled over because you think they know which way the wind is blowing?
Yeah. They didn't do what they do with dogs, which is have a huge bevy of outrage, where outraged people are interviewed all week and et cetera, because they know that's not going to play with the voters, and that's what they care about. Very smart of them. This creepy thing is the one of the people in the New York Times, the head of Mount Holyoke, I believe, suggested that one of the ways they get through the loophole would be to ask on a question on the application, "We are committed to diversity. What relate to us your experience with diversity and why you want to join our diversity community?" And it comes perilously close to being a loyalty oath or a litmus test. And I don't know what I think about this. I'm of two minds. Seems to me if Mount Holyoke wants to run a college committed to diversity, they should be able to run a college committed to diversity. The same way, Ron DeSantis could run a college, committed to not talking about, homosexuality and transgender ideology. If that's what he wants to do, people should be free to form like-minded communities. On the other hand,
he hasn't said he wants to do that, right? But you're saying if he wanted,
no, he has taken over this one college.
Oh, that's right. He has a whole college.
Chris Rufo.
But they can talk about homosexuality there, can't they?
I know. I'm exaggerating, but
they're free to denounce it, I think.
Whatever Chris Rufo wants, they could do. And I support him, but I go both ways. It's also a creepy loyalty test.
So what is it at Mount Holyoke? This is something people would actually sign or
it was, in your college education, tell us how you are going to contribute to our goal of diversity.
Oh, I see. Well, you could always say, I'm going to be, you could always say, I'm going to be one of the students who's against diversity. And then you'll also have students who are for diversity, and then you'll have a diverse attitudes toward diversity. Right.
Right. But the assumption is that those people who write that on their application will not get into Mount Holyoke.
There's a chance of that.
So that's the problem, and it's an attack on ideological diversity, as they say. Mm-hmm. I tend to think the way out of this dilemma is to let 1,000 flowers bloom, and yet let universities be what they want to be. Let in who they want to let in, as long as they don't discriminate by race, and let the chips fall. Mm-hmm. And have businesses realize that if you go to Mount Holyoke, maybe we shouldn't hire somebody from Mount Holyoke because they're going to be a diversity zombie. Maybe we should hire somebody from Princeton because they have too many people with orange hair. But most people think otherwise on the right, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's, as we said last week, there could be a lot of workarounds that colleges can use so that the ruling will have less impact than you might otherwise think. So should we say anything about Threads? We could talk about it in the Parrot Room. We can
talk about Threads.
Here's my line on Threads is I think it is designed to exclude old people. Okay.
Is it only available on the phone? Because the only way I got it.
That's where I was getting. It's not. They said. So there's a phone app. I downloaded it. Was disappointed to see that my Twitter username is already taken. Someone else is calling themselves Robert Ryder, and I will not rest until the culprit is tracked down and brought to justice. But that aside, there's a smartphone app, but they say they have no plans to create a Mac, an app for the Mac computer or Windows computers. And I can't think, there is a website that's called thread.net. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but I can't get it to do anything. I mean, there's this pattern that I'm thinking like, wait, am I supposed to take a picture of that with my smartphone? Because it looks a little bit like, those things, those digital pattern things that you take pictures of. But what would be the point of that? I've already got the app on my phone, and I can't, I don't get it. But that's the deal. Is people too old to get it? They don't want people too old to get it. And, people our age, I think, are more likely to prefer typing on an actual keyboard if they're going to do a sentence of any length. Whereas, younger people have developed a magical ability to type very fast on smartphones. And for them, it's just like a normal thing. So
bizarre.
What's that? It seems bizarre to me. I mean, it's a total pain. It's a total pain to type on a smartphone, no matter how good you are, it seems to me. But so that's my theory about Threads. Also, it seems kind of not ready for prime time because, for example, you can't yet curate you can't choose. You have fewer options than you do on Twitter. You can't choose to just see what your followers post. It has to, the only feed, as I understand it, is the people you're following, plus a bunch of shit that Mark Zuckerberg wants you to see. And they're just mingled into one feed, kind of like the For You feed on Twitter, but there's no alternative, whereas there is on Twitter. All that said, it seems like a lot of people are checking it out. I mean, in my brief time there, I saw a lot of people.
But I have a simple response to it. It's too fucking nice. Like everything Mark Zuckerberg does, there are too many people saying nice things, posting photos of sunsets. Here's a nice photo of a sunset somebody's posted. You don't get a good dialogue if everybody's nice to everybody.
Well,
and Facebook is way too nice. If you criticize somebody on Facebook, they'll just take your post down. I don't think people have the authority to do that on this, but everybody's being nice and they like it that way, and so I don't want to go there.
Well, it could change if a lot of people migrate from Twitter, but remember, right now it's kind of an extension of Instagram. You have to have an Instagram account first, and of course, the big advantage of Twitter, compared to everyone else who wants to start a Twitter rival, is that you've got this for people who are on Instagram with a lot of followers or and people are following, they can just transport all that over to this, and nobody else can offer that. But that's the other thing. That's the other thing I want to say about ageist. Note that Zuckerberg is not making it automatic and natural to go from Facebook to Threads, because people on Facebook are old. He doesn't want them. He's making the fundamental connection between Instagram and Threads.
Because he wants advertising. Why would he not want? He
wants young, attractive people. He doesn't like people like us, Mickey. We should file a class action lawsuit. This is age. What's that?
He is neither young or attractive.
He's young, and he knows Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I'd be pretty fucking careful what I said about him if I were you.
Here's the one negative tweet I found. I was scrolling for sunset photos and all this nice Instagrammy crap. One negative thing I found is by a young, attractive person by the name of Tom Brady.
Oh, I know him. Says, Tom and I go way back.
Hey, my combine photo is banned on Threads, right? We're going for positivity here, question mark.
Wait, what happened? Brady, he got a photo banned?
He says he has a photo ban. I don't know. My combine photo. What would be a combine photo? Is that something?
I think a combine is a football. Isn't that the thing they do to get tested for, like when they test their running speed and everything? That's not a combine.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Why wouldn't you post Tom Brady's combine photo?
Why would he have a combine photo? He's retired. This is the other. There's so many mysteries surrounding this.
Oh wait. And then the second tweet is apparently not, and there's the combine photo. So what the hell?
Oh, well, thanks, Tom.
It's a very attractive picture of Tom Brady.
So I think Threads could succeed, if anything can, against Twitter.
The My big test is the Maggie Haberman test. If Maggie Haberman is there and that's her main posting spot, then she'll drag the rest of the press corps with her. She's there, but all she's doing is saying, "Hey, this place is too nice." So this place is so nice. I feel like it's less nice.
The reason I think it's trouble for Musk is that I think, and she may be one of them, I think there are a non-trivial number of people who were on Twitter and they were important, voices, but they also had built up something of an Instagram feed. There have been people who dabble in both. And for those people, if you've got any kind of following on Instagram, which I don't, you go there and right away you feel like people are paying attention to you on Threads. And that's the kind of reinforcement that no one else can offer, or it's harder for other Twitter rivals to offer.
I don't know if the refundable tax credit community is going to migrate to Instagram.
Well, that was my big question, because I always think of you first whenever anything happens in the world, and I was worried about your welfare on Threads, and so that was what I was wondering.
I guess if Twitter is, the policy disagreement community is not a big moneymaker for Musk, although it is central to why Twitter is important.
Mm-hmm.
But he may not care, but he should care. I don't know, and why is Twitter sort of broken down and not working very well? And there's a new tweet deck, and even it doesn't work very well. And isn't it obviously that he's negotiating with Google over, will I pay you billions for your servers? And so he's trying to cut back on the amount of servers he uses while he's negotiating.
I thought they had already cut a deal where they're going to get a bunch of free ads instead of the money he owes them. I heard that somewhere, but so that was the alarm you heard some minutes ago. So we're supposed to be the music is supposed to start playing the Oscar usher them off stage music, and we will head to Patreon.
Jealous music.
What's that?
Then jealous music. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, I think of Chariots of the Gods when I think of either one of us. Patreon.com/Parrot Room. What are we going to talk about there, Mickey? Oh, also, if you smash the like button, that's good karma. But what are we going to talk? Do you have things you're going to talk about in the Parrot Room?
Parrot seems to be dead. We'll revive him.
That is a Monty Python bit. That is it not?
Yes, it is. It's nailed to the perch.
So
the choir invisible. So we have this whole censorship fuss, this court case that is written by a Trump judge that fulminates against Biden's the Democratic censorship industrial complex, and we can talk about that. I have a weird legal point about the web designer who claimed her business was expressive. Well, why aren't other businesses expressive? I think there's a reason. You have a big piece in the New Yorker about your friend who ran the Titan submersible that was destroyed.
He's not my friend, but I never met him. But I read the piece. It's an interesting piece, and we should talk about that.
We can talk about it.
It's not going to help. It's not going to help his legacy, I think.
No, we have. We've both seen the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. Very interesting movie.
You more recently than I, but yes, I first saw it when I was like 4 or 5 years old.
When was the most recent time you saw it?
About 20 years ago.
Oh, really? Oh, you didn't watch it recently?
Not recently, but I get the idea.
It's a film about you, Bob.
No, as I said, I saw it when I was 4 or 5. I think it shaped my whole worldview. I am Klaatu. Was that his name?
I'm trying to think of if you're Klaatu, the hero, or Gort, his vicious robot friend.
Was Klaatu the man who was also named Carpenter?
Yes.
We'll talk about all this. We'll talk about the allegorical.
You can reveal whether you're Klaatu or Gort.
Okay.
We have the French riots.
Oh, yeah.
It seems to me there's some some whitewashing going on of the role of a certain international migratory phenomenon that
We talked about that last week. You have to come up with a new Trumpist angle, Mickey.
no, I can repeat it.
No.
There's some
Those
new,
are the
there's
rules.
some
New Trumpist angle every week. Those are the rules.
there's Dr. Love, who famously debated Malcolm Gladwell on the value of hormone replacement therapy, died.
Yes.
So we can revisit that. Macron actually had a good idea, a good policy idea, so I can show my soft liberal side by endorsing it.
Mm.
Is artificial intelligence the solution to the complete inability to muster an all-volunteer army?
I see where you're going.
How do cities rebound? And which dementia village will we choose to live in, Bob?
I don't know, but we're on the verge of overpromising, Mickey. How long are you planning to tape?
Until the last dog dies.
That's kind of a
So what are you
sensitive
gonna talk
subject with me, Mickey. But
Oh, sorry. I didn't
yeah,
realize that.
yeah.
What are you
right.
I deeply apologize.
I want to complain about Timothy Snyder. I want to complain about the New York Times. Something specific they've both done. I watched some other science fiction. We haven't talked about the final episode of Silo yet, have we? You probably haven't watched it. I did.
Right.
I have something to say about Silo. I watched the first episode of Foundation, this streaming version of Asimov. I might say something about that. And
what happens? You know what happens at the Foundation? The mule comes along and destroys everything. So why do we have to watch the first episode?
Is that actually true? You've ruined the rest of my whole.
It's a trilogy.
I don't want to know. No plot spoilers, especially involving a mule.
Okay, well,
mule in the sense of
mule
in the sense of drug transporter, or mule.
Mule is a Trump-like figure. Defies the rules of psychometrics or psychohistory.
Okay, maybe a little more about Threads, or else the cage match itself, which between Elon and Zuckerberg, which of course was Threads. This is how it started. Is it in a conversation about the coming of Threads? Is how that whole absurdity began. Okay, that's plenty. Plus, we'll just be entertaining. Patreon.com/Parrot Room. Smash like button. What?
Revive the Parrot Room, much like Gort revived Klaatu.
Well said.
How about that? Hey.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm alive.
Okay, thank you, Bird. We'll see you in the Parrot Room.